one of the arguments that I read the most during this week, it was that people felt like, similarly to what happened with Facebook and with Mark Zuckerberg's audience, that there was a general feeling of unease of how uneducated the regulators in the US were. And moving away from the US, because as you said, the world is big enough to just focus on one nation the whole time. I know that Sascha you just went through the whole process of becoming regulated in Germany. So how did you find the regulators' perspective from an education sense in there?
Very open-minded, I should say. They knew exactly that this is an area which they don't fully understand. So they obviously had the usual arsenal of, financial, or particularly risk management regimes, but they were ready to negotiate, if you will, or to at least find a positive, constructive route how to apply them to the crypto space. And I must say that even when it comes to capital requirements, I think everything that we discussed was very reasonable, very constructive. And as we came in first, I think we probably also did something right, and I think we purposely went the extra route to explain ourselves, explain the industry, make sure they understand. Obviously they come from a very different space, a very different angle. They're used to traditional securities. They just went for the MiFID exercise, so that probably shaped their thinking a little bit. But I found them, extremely constructive and open. And it's not just Bafin, in our case, also Bundesbank, the German central bank, that also took a vivid interest. And so far so good. I can only speak highly of them.
I would just build on that because we're obviously in Liechtenstein, which is very close to Germany, and I know they moved a bit quicker. I mean, the smaller countries tend to be a bit more nimble. Again, Liechtenstein's a AAA rated EEA member state. We're not in the Seychelles. Like, there's a real country and a real regulator, and it's MiFID too. I mean, the Liechtenstein bank regulator is an EU bank regulator. So we went there because they set up and passed a blockchain act. We are the first exchange to be supervised under the blockchain act. So, I think that's, again, and I know that the guys from Liechtenstein were up at Bafin explaining to them, and I think they actually copied a lot of some of the stuff in the Liechtenstein blockchain act, because it came so early. It was 2 and 3 years ago. So, I think that, good regulation, building on what others have said and Dan said, that's what we want. We want to be regulated. We want to be supervised, but we want it to be rational and make sense. And I think that's what you're finding in Europe. And with this MiCA legislation that's coming, which is great, if you're supervised in an EEA or EU member state by a bank regulator, you'll be able to then officially passport throughout the EU, not just do sort of reverse solicitation. So I think it's only going to get better.
The only thing I should say is that hopefully it's not just the regulator, but also the tax regimes that somewhat harmonize. And there is a proposal out there in Germany right now, and you can read it in a way that, any asset you stake would be, would basically be locked in for 10 years from a tax perspective, which certainly is not positive. It's certainly not the last word. I'm just saying that it's not just the financial regulatory regime, it's also the tax regime that needs to kind of understand what crypto really is all about.
And I'd say from my standpoint is that, since we started our business in 2013, we've gone through sort of an educational training process with everything from regulators to investigators to, even the local cyber police, to educating even what blockchain was or how to deal with things. We've educated the likes of the Deloittes and the guys who are the auditors, who are, really, when the governments are looking at guidelines of regulations and illegal, they go to lawyers and they go to auditors to give them a framework and direction. And I think it's ultimately our responsibility, the people that are building this economy, to educate and provide guidance and directive. There is some responsibility in our world that we should be providing that information and education and guidance and supporting the regulators, because they only know what they know, right? And they're not actively involved in our space. I've taken the stance in some cases to actually be on boards and advisory spaces to support with information that these guys don't know, nor do the legal minds that are there. They don't know. They're not actively involved in the payment space. They're not actively involved in crypto. They're taking information that they hear and they see and they read, but ultimately, I think it's our responsibility to support these groups and organizations to guide and to create regulatory frameworks that we can work within, whether it's innovation or technology, or it's following their financials construct, right? You have crypto as an investment. You have we all saw the ICO days. We saw abuse of investments, right? And or marketing. We saw different strategies within crypto market as a speculation space. We know that also happens in the stock markets, right? The OTC market in the US is ripe with challenge, and it's fully regulated. But is it better or is it worse? The regulation doesn't make it better or worse. Eventually, people are still abusive. But I think crypto today is changing in many ways, much more adoption than we had 3 years ago. And the regulators, governments, the central banks are all catching up to where it is. I think they're going to be always in a catch-up phase, just like innovation is. So, I think it's our responsibility to educate and provide feedback and support with where we want to see it go, not be dependent on what's going to happen.
And to add to that point, because we started this discussion talking about the resilience of the crypto markets in tough times, at least when it comes to certain things. And we're talking about educating regulators and how, of course, like Jason said, they're not going out of their way to educate themselves. So it should be upon our industry to educate them. There is, of course, the other side of the coin, that is that whenever people see that a celebrity has a huge impact on the prices in the market and in the way the markets move, it can be scary for certain people. It can look like the Wild West for certain people.